All right, hi. I'm Ricky. This is Eve. We're the tender trainers, right? So we help subcontractors with their tendering. So basically, our goal is to help you make this process as simple and successful as possible, so you can win those bigger contracts with less stress. So we try and do this on a regular basis, don't we, Eve? So yeah, jump on, ask us questions, DM us, anything that would be good to cover.
Absolutely. We love getting a little bit of input and feedback and questions from our audience. We're obviously talking to subcontractors every day. So we kind of have a feel for what our clients and our audience need, obviously. It'd be a bit of a worry if we didn't. But on an individual basis, being able to address questions and comments and kind of give people just a few tips or ideas or just point them in the right direction is something that's really fulfilling for us. That's what we like to do. So if anyone on our LinkedIn or our YouTube, they've got any specific questions they want to jump on and ask us, please feel free. Don't feel shy. And we'll answer it in one of our lives.
Absolutely.
Ricky, I have to just confess something right now. My laptop's about to die. So you keep talking. I'm going to plug
it in. I'm going to start. So the topic that we're going to talk about today, while Eve's doing that in the background, is around paying yourself as a director and also recovering your wage in the estimate and how you do that. So we all know, or we should know, that you as a director, your time, it is recoverable through the work that you do for the company, right? You should and you need to be paying yourself. And it needs to be in a sustainable way. You need to be able to live, and the business needs to be sustainable as well. And paying yourself is part of that business sustainability. So it's important that you pay yourself, and it's important that you recover the money for your wage as a director in the right ways. So firstly, I want to talk about accounting purposes, right? When you probably, for accounting purposes, Eve and I, we're both directors of a company as well. We do the same thing, but we pay ourselves a wage below the national insurance threshold. So that's a wage of about $8K, I can't remember the exact figures, a year. So we pay ourselves that in salary, and the rest we make up of our wage in dividend payments, right, from the profit of the company. So I don't want this to get confused with how you need to recover the money through your estimating. We want to be crystal clear on how much retained profit we want from our pricing. So this is how you pay yourself. In the estimate, we need to be thinking of it a little bit differently. So should I go through the ways we do it, Eve?
Please do.
Okay, so right, recovering your wage. So as a director, the first thing that you need to consider is how much you want to pay yourself. So is it 20, 30, 40, 50 grand? I mean, this is completely up to you. This is how you choose your wage as the director, how much you pay yourself. It's completely up to you, but you need to find a balance, right? You can't just go and pay, if you're a company that's turning over 200 grand, you can't just go and pay yourself 200 grand, obviously. It needs to be, sustainable again for the business. And in the early days, you might choose to make it a little bit smaller until you grow a bit more, which I see a lot of directors doing as well. But you should be paying yourself and you should be recovering something for your wage, for your time. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So then we recover this through our estimating, and we do it in one of the following ways. So the first way that you can recover your wage through the estimate is recovering it directly as a labor resource. So this is where you would include your wage that you've just worked out, your prorated wage, it might be on a daily basis, on each of the jobs as a labor element. And if you're on the tools, if you're working to, if you're chippy and you are doing carpentry work and you're a director as well as running the business, this is probably the way that you should do it, where you're paying yourself a wage as the labor element.
Right. And so just to be clear on this, this is so important, because what we have seen, Ricky, quite regularly is that our clients kind of have a bit of an approach to tendering where they don't really think about their salary. It's almost like, well, I'll just make some money on it, and then somehow the profit will mean that I can pay myself. Like, it's not really factored in. And yet, if they are in a position where they're paying themselves salary on an ongoing basis, which, you know, ideally you would be, you really do need to be factoring it into the price. Like, it's got to be in there.
Absolutely.
And if you're someone who is acting as site manager, if you are acting as, you know, foreman, if you are the ganger, whatever you want to call it, or even if you're jumping in and helping the guys on a labor basis, depending on the size of the company and where you're kind of at with it, even if you're effectively acting as contracts manager, where you come to site once a week and you check in on how everything's going and you oversee it and you have a meeting with the client, whatever it is, that should be in the estimate, that time that you're putting in.
Because what happens when you put it in your estimate and your estimate gets approved, you're effectively charging the client for your time by doing it that way. So that's why it's important.
Correct. And there's nothing funny about that.
Absolutely.
That's what you're doing. If that's part of the management costs,
that takes me back to my initial thing that I said. You are a recoverable resource. So your time is recoverable and the client should be paying you for it.
Correct.
If you're working on their project.
Correct. I think almost as business owners, like, there's this like weird space we can get into sometimes where it's like, oh, that's the time that I put into making sure that everything's going okay, so I just do that. And it's like, no, like, if you're a much bigger company, you're going to be paying someone to do that role. You're doing that role. That's a role that's needed. That's the role that the client wants. They want to make sure that everything's happening. Now, don't get me wrong, they might come back, and it's really common for prelims to be stripped back at tender stage. So it's quite likely that they might come back and say, hey, why do you have a contracts manager, 1 day a week? What's that for? And then you just need to explain to them, like, this is quality control. This is, this is so I can come in and check health and safety and quality, whatever the thing is. This is the time required, and just kind of push back on that a bit, because they are going to want to know, this is so we can make sure progress is on track. This is for coming in for meetings, et cetera, et cetera. They might push back on it a bit, and they might ask you to strip it back. That can happen, can't it?
Yeah, it can.
So how do we deal with that then?
Well, I haven't. Okay. Well, if I can continue going through the ways that we can recover our wage, we can talk about that.
Okay, perfect.
So the first one I talked about is recovering your wage by making you a labor resource. The second one goes on from what Eve is saying, which is recovering your wage as a staff resource. So that could be a project manager, contracts manager, whatever title you give yourself, but you're not on the tools. You're a prelim cost in that respect. So this is including your prorated wage on each job as a non-working preliminary. That's what Eve's talking about there. That's the second way to recover it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The third way is to recover it via your overheads. So this would be where you include your wage in your overheads, your company overheads, and then we work out our overhead percentage and we apply that to each job and we recover it that way. So what happens when you're doing that? It's probably the safest way, particularly if you're doing a lot in the background. If you recover it via your overhead, you're a bit safer. If you're doing it completely via the first or the second route, via a labor or a staff resource, we need to make sure that it's 100% covered on all the various jobs you're doing, right? That becomes a little bit hard. So what I recommend that you do is you recover it that way where you can. So if you are a staff resource, for example, you might have one day that you can recover from a project or one from another project. There might be 3 days that you can't recover because you're working on the business. So in that sense, I would use a mix where you're directly recovering as a staff resource on sub jobs and recovering the rest as an overhead on the others. Does that make sense, Eve?
It does. And you mentioned there that it can be hard. And I just want to highlight a couple of reasons why that might be and just see if your thoughts are kind of aligned on that.
Yep.
I think one reason it can be hard to recover it is because, as I said, prelims is something that's really commonly pushed back at tender stage, where they'll say, oh, you've included 2 days a week for a contracts manager, and I just don't think that we need that much. We'll give you one. And so if you're kind of expecting that, like, right, I'm purely recovering my wage just through the labor or the project management element, and that gets pushed back. Less so on labor, obviously. If you're quite small and you're one of the chippies on a job and there's 3 of you and that's how you're recovering your wage, okay, there's not much, but it's more so in the management side. It's quite common to see that get stripped back. But I would still be looking at including it because it gets your mind thinking that way about what you're doing as well. I've got 2 days that I'm working on this job. I've got 2 days on this job. And then the other reason it can be hard, right, is because it depends on your pipeline, doesn't it?
Exactly.
If you suddenly have a bit of that job's finished, next job doesn't start for 3 months, and you're only recovering your wage through that like project management portion in your preliminaries.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily going to be super consistent depending on how many projects you have at a time, how short your projects usually are, or how long that, etc. So it's not a perfect science, that one.
Exactly.
But it's still, I think, something that we should be doing on every project. But I think you got to be looking at how else you're recovering it as well.
Exactly. Exactly like what you're saying. That's why I say overheads might be the safest way. And that reason is because unless you've got a pipeline full of work all year through, and you can recover your wages through staff all the way through, you might be fine to do it that way incompletely. But if you've got one job and then a break and then one job and a break, and you can't necessarily allocate your 100% time to those jobs, that's where it's going to be patchy and you won't be recovering your full wage.
I'd personally be looking at doing both, because the thing is that the journey that we take with our clients, especially in pipeline to growth and especially in one-to-one, is that we are working with them to implement team members that help them to get out of being the people who are constantly on site. I mean, we do it through Get Reset. We do it everywhere, but it's at different levels, depending on how big the company is and what stage they're at. So with the idea of kind of having it in your prelims, if you can look at your jobs that you've got on and you're like, hang on, I've got 4 days a week that I'm recovering for contract managers because I've got these 3 different projects on, and I'm way too busy, and I'm recovering something for myself as well in the overheads, it becomes very easy to make that decision to bring in a contracts manager. You might be like, I've got 2 days a week. Well, you might be able to find someone who, for example, has their own business but is looking for a couple of days a week extra work as a contracts manager to beef out their cash flow. So you can very quickly see where your time is going, how much time you're spending just in the business, how much time you're doing an actual work for clients, and where you're actually already recovering it. So I think doing both, to me, is a very you need to keep yourself, obviously, it's always going to be the balance of keeping yourself competitive. But that's the line that we're always playing with when we're pricing, isn't it?
Exactly. So just a note on the recovery in your wage through your overheads. I've done a YouTube. You can go on our YouTube channel and you can watch our live on recovering your overheads, how to calculate your overheads, and include them in your estimate. So I think Eve will drop a link into that video if you're interested in watching or learning with a demonstration as well on how to calculate your overheads.
Yeah, just dropping that in now.
Perfect.
So you did a whole series called Pricing Back to Basics.
That's right. Yeah.
That we've got on YouTube, and it's basically covers off exactly how to price from first principles. It's hugely valuable. It's sitting there on YouTube that anyone can jump in and learn. If you're not pricing from first principles, or if you're not feeling confident in your price, you're not really sure that you're quite getting it right, you have some price anxiety, you're keeping yourself awake at night wondering if you're going to make profit at the end of the project, jump into YouTube. It's all there.
Yeah.
So that's such a good little valuable free resource that we have for subcontractors there. We obviously have our various programs and courses and so on, but we do a lot of little value pieces for free as well.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'll back to this one then. So we've got the 3 ways, right? You're covering it for your labor, prelims, or overheads, or a mix, overheads and something else. So when we're recovering our wage this way, we're keeping it separate from our profit, right? And we're including it as a cost in our estimate. So that's very different again to the accounting, how you do actually literally pay yourself. But I need to make that clear. We are keeping it separate from our profit in our estimating. This allows you to get deeper with a better understanding into the profit that you're going for in your estimating. So that's really important. We want to understand exactly what retained profit we're coming out of from a job, from the estimate stage. So keeping that separate is very important, and that's what we do in our estimate. So yeah, that's kind of what I had for this one, Eve.
Okay, so to recap, so we've got 3 ways you could include as labor, depending on how big you are and what your function on site is at the moment. Include in labor, include in prelims as project management, time,
Including
and
overheads.
and including the overheads. And if you're not too sure how to make that calculation, as we said, we've dropped the link there for YouTube. We take you through exactly how to make that calculation.
For sure.
Ricky, why do we care about this? Like, why are we doing this one today?
Well, I see it too often with some of our clients where their wage and what they pay themselves, they're leaving it to a little bit too much luck, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of paying themselves based on what happens rather than going it to the start and including what they want.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be leaving it down to luck. We should know what we want to pay ourselves, and that will change as your business grows, develops, etc. For example, at the start, you might choose small and it might grow as your business grows. But we should know what we want to pay ourselves. We should be recovering it or including it in our estimate, recovering it via what we get paid and paying ourselves appropriately so that our business is sustainable.
Yeah, bang on. It's kind of throw a few things at the wall, see what sticks, do some projects, see if I make profit, pay myself. And actually, at the same time, so many of our clients have young families.
Yeah.
So many of our clients, have cash flow concerns, have stress around finances. So the key thing that we're all about isn't just winning tenders, because so what? Win a tender, do the work, make no money. It's sustainability. It's
Absolutely.
making profit. It's being able to pay yourself. It's being able to care for your family. It's all those things. That's kind of the big why behind what we're doing, and behind so much of what we do, and why we're getting behind Prosper's Project Bank Accounts campaign, and kind of the driving why behind what we're doing is that we want subcontractors to feel safe in their businesses. And we're tired of seeing companies going to liquidation. We're tired of, not tired of it is not the right word, but what we hear from our clients, the amount of stress that there is around money at subcontract director level, we're kind of on a mission to change that. So this is a really important piece.
Absolutely.
Thanks for sharing with us today, Ricky.
Thank you.
Awesome. If anyone wants to drop us a line and have a chat about how we can help with you getting your price right, let me know. We've got all those videos on YouTube as well there for you to check out. And we'll see you next week. What are we talking about next week, Ricky?
I can't remember. What are we talking about?
We're talking about how to get your time back as a subcontract director, how to use process, procedure, structure to kind of reclaim some time. Another really important.
Good.
All right. Ciao.
Cool. Bye.
Bye.